Hi, I'm Brandy with the Springs Preserve, and I'm here to help you garden successfully. Gardening can be a fun and rewarding experience. With the right tools and information, it doesn't have to be difficult. Site selection and planning are the first things you want to think about before planning any garden. The placement of plants is key, so we want to assess the site, and there's a few considerations that you can make to help in your success. Consider the exposure and orientation. Where will your garden bed face directionally? You want to aim for about 6 hours of direct sun per day, and remember that the sun's exposure changes throughout the seasons. In the Southwest, the summer's the most challenging time to garden. But if you only have the harsh south and west exposures to plant in, you can still do that. You just have to consider maybe building a framework or a structure so you can use shade cloth if necessary. If your school is closed in the summer, you don't even need to worry about it. You can just leave those beds empty in the hot months. Reflected heat is something to think about in the Southwest. If you have areas that are adjacent to buildings or walls or sidewalks, that area is more intense in heat than the ambient surrounding temperature. Those areas and hard surfaces absorb the heat throughout the day and then emanate it throughout the night, and that doesn't allow the plants any chance to cool down fully, and no edible bed is going to thrive in that kind of situation. Think about the direction of prevailing winds. It might necessitate a wind block to be used or delicate plants to be placed elsewhere on the property. If you have an area in your property where debris collects, often that can help you determine the direction of the wind. Consider what your access will be. You want to make sure that vegetable beds are near kitchens so you can harvest them when the plants are ready, that showy plants are in a place where you can appreciate those blooms. You really need to regularly check on vegetable beds so you can catch any issues early on. Plants might be a little dry, there may be leaks. If you have any pests, you want to catch them early. And again, when those plants are ready to harvest, you want to make sure that you enjoy those fruits of your labor. Drive-by gardening can let a lot of problems slip through the cracks. I recommend mapping your site. You can do this by drawing a sketch. If you use graph paper, it makes those dimensions a little bit easier. Or you can find an aerial view online of your property, and these can allow you to see what surrounding buildings and trees you have nearby that could impact your site. You want to make sure that shade from any of those are indicated on your drawing, as well as any large plants that you have on your property. Note as well any infrastructure, any overhead power lines you don't want to plant beneath. Speaking of infrastructure, before you put a shovel in the ground, you want to contact Call Before You Dig at 811. This is a free service that will come onto your property and mark underground utilities, including gas, water, sewer, and power. And this can really help determine the placement of plants and beds. Also think about exposure throughout the seasons. The sun angle changes throughout the year, as does the day length, so that's really important in thinking about placement of a vegetable bed. You might already be familiar with seasonal changes on your property, but if you're not, there are online applications that can help. When will you actively be gardening? This can help you determine the appropriate exposure and siting of vegetable beds. If you're not gardening year-round, those hot summer exposures maybe aren't as much of a consideration. This can help you decide what you want to plant and when to plant when you're planting. Think about water access. You'll need to irrigate these vegetable beds. Will you be doing this by hand, tying into an existing system, or building a new one? Edible beds require regular watering, and in the summer this can be a daily commitment. So if you're not ready to commit to that, you might think about an irrigation system. If your school's closed in the summer, the irrigation might also be off. So school garden position might be a little bit more flexible if you're not open in those hot months. Think about how you want to use the space. Are children the only ones using it? Will it also need to accommodate entertainment and play? Are there animals, service animals, pets, or wildlife there? This might require a little extra protection and planning to make sure there's easy access and that everything stays safe. Think about the flow of space. On your property, where is traffic moving? Where are those patterns? Are you hauling trash cans in and out? Will there be tractors or equipment moving in certain areas? This can really dictate where and when you can have placement of these plants so they don't get harmed. Once you've assessed the site, planning and design are the next considerations. So construction and planting can be done in phases, making larger jobs more manageable and helping with tight budgets. You can always start small. You can start with just a container gardening or one small bed, and you can always add to it and build upon those small areas. You don't want to bite off more than you can chew. And there are some practical considerations to think about when building beds. You don't want to make beds wider than you can reach, because if you step into the soil, you can compact that soil and damage root zones. So we want to make sure that the width is no longer than you can actually reach to get to the center of those beds. If you build higher beds, that's a lot less bending for you, but it requires more materials, including soil, so that can impact costs. Take the time to think through and plan the location of garden beds, and that can yield a productive space with less input from you. It's far easier to move a garden when it's still on paper than once it's built.